Welcome to How to Grow Using AI, Machine Learning, and Intelligent Automation, a podcast by eClerks. We explore how AI and machine learning are being used to scale businesses from end to end. But that's not all. In each episode, our industry experts dive deep into topics like AI-enabled sales optimization, predictive analytics, AI-powered marketing, and machine learning for product personalization. I promise to give you the goods, the insights, and the strategies that you need to grow your business. I am your host, Nicholas Cole. Thank you for joining us today. I am excited. Today I have joining me Ford Kerr. He is the head of AI and automation at Soar Autism Center. There he helps Soar take advantage of new technologies such as generative AI. And we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, Ford, why don't you let us know just a little bit more about yourself and your role there at Soar Autism Center?
Yeah, absolutely. Nicholas, great to be here. An honor. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so my background, it's healthcare in nature, started in consulting. So I was with Booz & Company and eventually went to get my MBA in healthcare management and then continued to BCG, another consulting firm. And then eventually made my way into software analytics. I worked for a analytics startup called Clarify Health for a number of years in product. And now I'm with Soar Autism Center. So Soar provides autism therapy for children 2 to 6 years old and provides kind of all the services they need in one place. It's a one-stop shop, if you will, which is a very powerful offering. And my job as head of AI and automation is kind of as it sounds. So I'm constantly looking for ways to infuse our organization with these tools to help us improve clinical quality, help us scale efficiently. And whether that's actually building things myself or sourcing from vendors is kind of all fair game in this rapidly evolving landscape.
You mentioned in your opening that part of your job is to help Soar take advantage of new technologies and to infuse the new technology. And of course, generative AI has been dominating the news. It has been one of the things that many organizations are excited about. And so could you kind of explain how can organizations specifically in healthcare take advantage of new technologies such as generative AI?
Yeah, it's a huge question. You know, I've joked that you can walk outside your house and throw a rock and hit someone that works for a company that would benefit from generative AI. And the healthcare company is no different, right? There's so many opportunities to leverage these technologies. But the question is where, how, to what extent? You know, the landscape is evolving so rapidly. And I think one of the exciting dimensions of this technological frontier is the extent to which the access to building is reaching a broader and broader audience. So, you know, I'm non-technical by nature. You know, I was a philosophy major that went into consulting, eventually worked my way into product and worked extensively with engineers. But now I find myself in a role where I'm regularly coding myself. And so these really powerful foundational technologies are becoming increasingly accessible for non-technical people. And also it's pay as you go, right? So, you know, large language models, all the stuff that exists, for example, in Google Workspace, you know, cloud computing technology, storage, etc., enables us to build things really effectively. And so as we think as healthcare organizations how to navigate the build versus buy question is really exciting because there are a number of applications that can be built. And the advantage that someone like me from inside of an organization has over a vendor is an understanding of the workflow, which, you know, having built software as a vendor for healthcare software or for healthcare organizations, I think someone said this, like, if you've seen one hospital, you've seen one hospital, you know, or if you've seen one payer, you've seen one payer or something like that. Just the variation from organization to organization is so dramatic. So the ability to craft solutions internally is a really exciting opportunity.
So you mentioned build versus buy. And so my wife actually is in healthcare. And so I'm very aware of all the privacy concerns and things that go along with that. And so how do you decide to build new technologies like generative AI in-house or buy? Go to a vendor outside. How do you decide which course is best?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, for any use case that we envision, we'll go through an exercise of valuing it. What is the impact on cost? What is the impact on quality? So we'll have an understanding of the value. And then we'll kind of think about how complex it would be to produce. And, one of my responsibilities is to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of the successive waves of productization that are occurring in this rapidly evolving ecosystem. And, the quicker we can get some form of prototype or a trial period with a vendor in front of actual users to validate whether the solution will behave in the way that we anticipate it will, in a way that is beneficial to the user, the quicker we can de-risk whatever it is we're producing. So that's one thing, try to understand up front and then validate assumptions quickly. But another piece is just revisiting. There's use cases that we've stood up that I'm actively looking at potential vendors to replace what I've built because the productization of that use case has caught up to where I am and they can do it more efficiently. And that's great too. So that flexibility as you navigate over time will also be important, I think.
Yeah. So you mentioned how the solution behaves. So that's particularly interesting to me. And so in that same vein, what are some of the challenges that you face or some challenges that some organizations, specifically in healthcare, may face while implementing new technologies?
Yeah. So I think one helpful example is, so there's a technology called retrieval augmented generation, right? And so many companies want to have a chatbot built on their data, right? So companies have a bunch of their own data and they want to enable employees to interrogate that data with a chatbot, which, it's not even a healthcare specific use case. It's a great use case for a lot of companies. There's one example of that for us that involves frontline clinicians being able to ask questions on the fly at the point of care. And that use case is incredibly useful in terms of being able to have vast amounts of information specific to our organization at their fingertips. The challenge is that they're writing the information very quickly and on an iPad. And so the quality of the actual question itself can be kind of it's like Google search speak, right? It's a fragmented question. And so you have to be able to embrace that and recognize that there are times in which you might have to repeat a question back or something of that sort in order to get what you need, versus another use case using the same technology, but it's a researcher. Let's say it's someone that works in our billing department that needs to figure out, some specific billing code requirement for one of our payers, and there's a 200-page manual they need to read. They're going to write eloquent questions about what they need that's very specific. And so the same technology can respond much more effectively. So I think it's about the same technology can vary in its quality, and it's about getting it in front of users, seeing how it behaves, as I mentioned, and adapting as you observe the behaviors.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, all of the advantages that it gives you, obviously they're vast, specifically with the chat bots that you were mentioning. So how do you decide what is the right area to implement technologies such as generative AI?
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned before, we try to, have sessions where, ideation sessions where anything we can think of that could be useful, we kind of write down. And then we go through a process of valuing it, right? And if the value is sufficiently high and we believe the complexity is sufficiently manageable, then we'll consider it. And I think in addition, there's the speed to which you can test it, to validate assumptions is also helpful. And I think one other thing I'll add is I think focus is important. There's an interesting phenomenon that I've observed and I've heard others articulate around. It's very easy to prototype something and get to an 80% solution, but actually getting an LLM to consistently behave at production grade, at scale, can be a whole other ballgame. And so there's kind of a respect for that delta that you also need to navigate. And you could reach a point where you're at the prototype stage and you realize that delta, you might not be there right now. And it might be worth putting that project on hold while certain technologies evolve and you revisit later.
So you mentioned focus. And so specifically when it comes to healthcare, often there's a collaboration that goes on. So how do you handle the collaboration of AI experts, healthcare professionals, and also policymakers to ensure successful implementation of generative AI technology?
Yeah, it's an important question. The opportunity in healthcare is vast, right? I think, the industry in the US alone is over 3.6 trillion. Who knows what it's grown to since I last looked at that stat, but the stakes are high, right? And I think if you look at AI experts versus healthcare policy people, I think they're starting on either end of a spectrum, right? The starting position for an AI expert is to push and grow and evolve rapidly, whereas a policymaker is going to be understandably and appropriately skeptical and concerned and conservative. And I think the role of folks like me, the role of companies that can benefit from this is to play that intermediary role, to help policymakers understand the value that it's worth really thinking through these things, but also putting pressure on the makers of these technologies to understand the importance of data security and privacy when it comes to healthcare.
So you brought up an interesting point there, the skeptics. And so to the skeptics who are out there, obviously this is a transformational technology, but there are also skeptics about it due to privacy concerns, due to data concerns. And so why should any organization, specifically in healthcare, consider pivoting to add in generative AI or other new and emerging technologies into their workflows?
I mean, at the highest level, because it's extremely valuable. So, if you can scale clinical quality more effectively by using these tools, it's incredibly attractive. So that would be the core reason. I think one way to navigate understandable concerns that emerge, you don't just want to shoot from the hip when we're doing these things. You need to be very thoughtful about how you manage privacy and data concerns, right? So, there's a few things that we think about actively. One is when it comes to PHI, does your use case actually require introducing PHI to an LLM? Or can you redact that information and in reality the use case doesn't require it? And then if you have to, how do you mitigate that risk as much as possible? Everybody across the data pipeline needs to have a BAA in place. You could even consider for highly sensitive use cases, having a locally hosted LLM. It's not even connected to the internet and you're using that function as opposed to sending it to one in the cloud. So, and then I think keeping a human in the loop is another important characteristic. So, if your use case involves drafting something or evaluating something, coming to a determination of some kind, having the process include a human in the loop is critical to just ensuring the consistency over time. And then I guess one last thing I'll toss in is monitoring that usage over time. The ability to say, okay, how has this tool been used? What have the responses been? What are the variations that we're seeing? And how do we evolve and improve over time? That learning loop is also critical.
Yeah. So you brought up something I was just about to ask you. So you mentioned the response. And so there at Soar, your particular niche, it's a different one. It's involving children with autism. And so implementing technology like this, what has the response been?
Our focus has been on building tools that are useful, right? That people consider useful. So they're intended to amplify the capabilities of whomever they're built for. And so in that sense, our goal is for them to be delighted with what they're experiencing, right? So, whether it's a chatbot that we've produced to help someone get answers to their questions more readily, or, a whole other thing that we've developed is a scheduling algorithm. And whether it's the scheduler designing the scheduler or the clinicians reviewing the resulting schedules, all of these different stakeholders, to the extent to which they see the solution as being better than what we had before, that it is a meaningful step forward. Those are the things that we look for.
Regarding the meaningful steps forward, as you've implemented new technologies such as generative AI, machine learning, and all the things that are out there, what has surprised you when it comes to implementing these types of technologies?
The thing that jumps to my mind is something I've already touched on, but it is very surprising. It's that delta between the 80% functional prototype and the 100% production grade solution. And when I say production grade, I think what I mean by that is the type of solution where the behavior of a large language model is sufficiently predictable, where you're getting a consistent result every time, or you have things like a human in the loop that can enable us to navigate when, 1 out of 10 times it does something less ideal than we would have wanted, right? And that crossing that delta has been really fascinating and challenging in certain use cases. And also as a company that's looking to source from vendors, vendors that are building things, right? They have things in flight that they're producing and they're going to align their roadmaps to your needs and those types of things. A healthy skepticism of how fast they'll be able to bridge that delta is worthwhile, I think.
Wow. So even bridging the delta, looking forward, how do you see generative AI shaping the future of healthcare?
Yeah. So, if I had a really high fidelity answer to this question, that would be really exciting. The evolution of these technologies and the way they're interacting with existing workflows is fascinating, and it's evolving so rapidly. So I think, some things I anticipate will be true is that there's going to be successive waves of productization. And so even for folks that are building, being mindful of how these things are being productized is going to be really, really impactful. I think another massive sort of domain that's particularly exciting in healthcare is the ability to structure unstructured data. So if you think about an electronic medical record, it's a dumping ground for so much healthcare that has been provided. These are voluminous stories about people. The amount of data on an individual can be substantial, but a lot of it is unstructured, and it's kind of proven to be a difficult nut to crack. And applications using EMR data can be inherently limited for that reason. But LLMs have a unique capability to structure unstructured data. And I think that one piece alone, the number of use cases that open up from that is really exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so from the use cases, you mentioned the use cases, from what you've been doing over there at Soar, do you have any do's and don'ts that you recommend to companies who are thinking about implementing new technologies like generative AI, but they haven't done it yet? They're a little slow about it just because of they're thinking about the risks and some of the concerns. You have some do's and don'ts that you can share?
Yeah, it might just be a synthesis of some of the things I've talked about, which is, have a strategy, be intentional about what it is you think can benefit from these technologies, and then apply a build versus buy lens to these types of things. So evaluation exercise, like I described, can be really helpful. And then going out and looking at the landscape and seeing what vendors might offer solutions. I think another important potential pathway for people to consider are development shops. So there's an emerging industry around basically having the type of skill set that I bring internally within SOAR to people that aren't necessarily thinking of hiring someone to build that capability in-house. And so, these are shops that will sit down with you and understand your needs and wire up things more specifically to your workflow than a prototypical software vendor, which is also an exciting pathway to consider. And then focus, really making sure that you outline a subset of use cases and you really follow them through to value delivery, because that 80% prototype, more often than not, it doesn't deliver 80% of the value. It might deliver 10% of the value, it might deliver 0% of the value. It might create more problems than it solves, right? So having the focus to really follow through to that production grade 100% solution to really ensure that your investments are delivering on value.
Ford, I really enjoyed my time with you today. And obviously, there's a lot of changes happening. And I look forward to all of the change, new technologies that will be developed, and the further exploration of the technology that has been developed, like generative AI. So With that said, if you could take one person to lunch in the field of AI, machine learning, intelligent automation, who would that person be and why?
Yeah. So my mind instantly jumps to Elon Musk. He's a controversial figure. The impact that he's had in terms of just broadly everything that he's produced in his lifetime is pretty amazing. And his perspective on AI, he has a very public set of opinions that he describes. I would love to have the dinner conversation version of that and really understand where he thinks the industry is going and, the broader philosophical considerations of AI and superintelligence are things that always fascinate me. And man, to sit with Elon and get his take, over dinner and a couple of drinks would be pretty awesome.
Awesome. So what I just want to remind you that you got my contact information, my email, and all of that. And so if you so happen to get an invitation to eat dinner or have lunch with Elon, make sure to send me an invite also. I would love to be a fly on the wall for that. So he's also one of those figures that I would love to go to lunch with. And so like you said, he has some amazing thoughts. I've been following for years. I think that would be a fascinating lunch or dinner or whatever it is. If I could sit down with him, I would love to be there with you.
You got it, Nicholas.
And so, Ford, it has been an awesome time with you. You provided some amazing insights, and I'm sure our listeners really enjoyed some of the things that you provided on today. To our listeners, be sure to stay tuned to our next episode. How to Grow Using AI, Machine Learning, and Intelligent Automation is brought to you by eClerks. For more information about services and how we can help your business leverage the power of AI and machine learning, visit our website at www.eclerks.com. That's www.eclerks.com. Don't forget to search for How to Grow Using AI, Machine Learning, and Intelligent Automation on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes. On behalf of everyone here at eClerks, thanks for listening.